Okay, so we're still working on tissues. We've done epithelial tissue. So can anyone tell me, raise your hand, what kind of epithelial tissue that is? I know it's small. Can anyone in the front couple rows? Gavin, do you got it? Give it a try.
Simple squamous.
It's squamous, but is it simple? Stratified. Why is it stratified?
Because there's layers.
There's layers. Yes. Great. So like Mr. Petrito said, some of you are still working on your epithelial lab, and that's okay. For those of you that are done, today we're going over connective tissue. Okay, there it goes. All right, so today's the introduction into connective tissue, and I know that seems really boring, and like this is just going to be a bunch of boring information, but if we don't do this today, when those of you who are looking at your connective tissue slides, you won't know what you're looking at unless we go over these things. So we're going to be going over major functions of connective tissue, characteristics of connective tissue, and the structural elements of connective tissue. So when I was an anatomy student, the analogy that I was taught that really helped me was that if you built a house with just bricks and nothing else, that your house wouldn't be very strong. And if you pushed on it, or if there was a big storm, your house would fall down. But if you build your house and you put cement in between all the bricks, it makes your house a lot stronger and it connects everything together. And that cement is like what connective tissue is in the body. So connective tissue in your body is going to help bind and support things together. It's going to help with protection. It's going to help insulate your body and transportation. So, for instance, blood. Blood is a connective tissue and it helps transport nutrients and oxygen throughout your body. So, I don't know if you guys remembered when you drew that drawing of epithelial, and we listed 3 characteristics of epithelial. One was polarity. What were the other 2? Can someone raise your hand and tell me the other 2?
Innervated.
Innervated, and then what's another one?
Avascular.
Avascular. Good. So connective tissue have 3 characteristics as well. So the first one is that their common origin is called mesenchyme tissue. So this is embryonic tissue, and it's where all connective tissue comes from. It's where the start of it comes from. So like if you have your parents and then all your siblings, your parents would be the origin. That's your mesenchyme tissue. Connective tissue has varying degrees of vascularity. So what was vascularity? Do you remember from epithelial tissues?
No.
Raise your hand. Somebody raise your hand. Yeah. Yeah, so there's not, vascularity means blood supply. So in epithelial tissues, we didn't have any blood supply. Here in connective tissues, there's a varying degree. So cartilage, which is a connective tissue, has it's avascular. It does not have a blood supply. Where then other kinds of connective tissue that we'll be looking at do have a blood supply. And then the third characteristics of connective tissue is that the cells are separated by a non-living extracellular matrix. So the extracellular matrix is referring to the ground substance and the fibers in connective tissue. And we're going to go over those individual parts. So the ground substance is this jelly substance here. So remember this dessert Mr. Petrito was talking about with the fruit and the jello surrounding it? The jello is your ground substance. The fruit inside is the cells and everything else in our connective tissue. So there's a lot on this slide. And we're not going to, on a test, ask you all the components of ground substance. This is more for you to know it, and then when you go to college, you've at least seen this kind of stuff. So I'm going to go through them now, just so you have an idea, but you don't have to be frantically writing down all these notes. The main thing from the slide that you should be writing down is that the ground substance is the jelly part. That's the part in between all the cells. So the components of the ground substance are the interstitial fluid, and that's the fluid that contains all the nutrients in between all your cells. Then you have adhesion proteins, and that's how the cells are going to actually attach. It's the glue where the cells are going to attach to the ground matrix. Then you have protoglycans, which is just proteins that collect water. They trap water in the ground substance, and that's going to give your ground substance the consistency. So some connective tissue is really jelly, like this jello dessert. And some, like bone, for instance, which is a connective tissue, is really hard. So there are 3 types of fibers that we're going to see in connective tissue. The first is collagen fibers. Those are the thick bands you'll see, and they're white, and they're really strong. They're strong but flexible. So your book gives the example that if you had a piece of steel the same size as a collagen fiber, the collagen fiber would be stronger. Then we have elastic fibers, which they're a lot thinner than collagen fibers, but the main characteristic from them is that when you stretch them, they'll also go back to the same size. So it's kind of like the elastic on your waistband. When you stretch it, it'll go back to the same size. And then reticular, they're very thin, they're the thinnest, and they're branch-like, and they form nets, interconnected nets, and they help support your organs. And reticular actually means net. I think in Latin it's little net, so that's how I remember reticular, because they form nets, and the name actually means net. So we can look at those actual fibers on this drawing, and there's a lot going on in this drawing. When you look at the actual connective tissue under a microscope, you're not going to see all this. It's not going to look this like how the book drawings are going to look, but this is just so you get an idea of what things are looking like, how things are organized. So we have our ground matrix, which is the fibers and the ground substance. So we have the ground substance, and this is the collagen fiber. And notice how this is a white color, where our blood vessel is very red. And then we have elastic fibers and the small branch-like reticular fibers here in blue. So again, there's a lot on this slide. You don't have to write everything down, because Mr. Bertrito in the next coming days is going to go into more depth of what the function of each of these kind of cells is. The main point from this slide is the difference between blasts and cytes and how we name these cells. So if you see anything with a blast at the end of it, that's an immature cell. And what that cell is doing is it's secreting the ground substance and the fibers. It's secreting the stuff to make your matrix. If you see the word cyte at the end of your cell name, then that cell is a mature cell. And what that cell is doing is it's just helping to maintain the matrix. So it's not creating it, it's just helping to maintain it and repair it. So we have fibroblasts in connective tissue proper. You have chondrocytes. Chondrocytes are in cartilage. And I know that because of the first part of the word, chondro. Anytime you see chondro, think cartilage. Osteoblasts, those are immature bone cells. I know that it's an immature bone cell because osteo means bone. Anytime you see osteo, you're going to think bone. Anytime you see blast, you're going to think immature cell. So that's pretty much all you need to take away from this slide. So kind of something to help you relate to this is, for instance, your mast cell right here. How many of you have allergies? So when you have an allergy, your body recognizes, your mast cell recognizes that there's an invader, and it starts to secrete histamine. And that causes your runny nose and a bunch of fluid to accumulate. And you'll take a pill, and that pill has antihistamine in it. And it's going to repress the response of these mast cells. So it's kind of cool. It all relates back. This next slide, again, is just going over your mesenchyme tissue. That's the origin. These cells are going to make all of your connective tissue. And then when you're doing your lab, now in the second part of class, what you're going to be looking for, just like epithelial tissues, you want to know the description of what you're looking at, the function of connective tissue, and its location in the body. And then we can go and work on the lab now.
Cool.